Today's unfortunate story is about a Mary Flora Bell. She's an English woman who is a juvenile, killed two preschool-age boys in Scotswood, an inner suburb of Newcastle upon Tyne, in the year of 1968. Bell committed her first killing when she was 10 years old. In both instances, Bell informed her victim that he had a sore throat, which she would massage before proceeding to strangle him. Bell was convicted of manslaughter in relation to both killings in December year of 1968 in a trial held by Newcastle Assizes when she was 11 years old, in which her actions were judged to have been committed under diminished responsibility. She is Britain's youngest female killer and was diagnosed with a psychopathic personality disorder prior to her trial. Her alleged accomplice in at least one of the killings, a 13-year-old Norma Joyce Bell, no relation, was acquitted of all charges. Bell was released from custody in the year of 1980 at the age of 23. A lifelong court order granted her anonymity, which has since been extended to protect the identity of her daughter and granddaughter. She has since lived under a series of pseudonyms. Mary Bell's mother, Elizabeth Betty Bell, was a well-known local prostitute who was often absent from the family home, frequently traveling to Glasgow to work and simply leaving her children in the care of their father, if he was present. Mary was her second child, born when Betty was 17 years old. The identity of Mary's biological father is unknown for most of their life. Mary believed her father to be William Billy Bell, a violent alcoholic and habitual criminal with an arrest record for crimes including armed robbery. However, she was a baby when William Bell married her mother. It is unknown if he is her actual biological father. Mary was an unwanted and neglected child, according to her aunt, Isa McCricket. Within minutes of Mary's birth, her mother had resented hospital staff attempting to place her daughter in her arms, shouting, "Take the thing away from me." Despite her negligence and abuse of her child, Betty refused repeated offers from her family to take custody of Mary, whom she as a dominatrix is alleged to have begun allowing and or encouraging several of her clients to sexually abuse in a sadomasochistic sessions by mid-1960s. Mary's mother actively participated in several of these sessions, including several in which she blindfolded her daughter with a stocking before restraining her hands behind her back and forcing her to perform oral sex upon her clients. Both at home and at school, Mary exhibited numerous signs of disturbed and unpredictable behavior, including sudden mood swings and chronic bedwetting. She is known to have frequently fought with other children, both boys and girls, and to have attempted to strangle or suffocate her classmates or playmates on several occasions. On occasion, she is known to have attempted to block the trachea of a young girl with sand. This violent behavior made many children reluctant to play with Mary, who would frequently spend her free time with Norma Joyce Bell, the 13-year-old daughter of a next-door neighbor with whom she had become acquainted with in the early year of 1967. Although the girls shared the same surname, they were not related. According to one classmate of Delaware Road Junior School, by the year of 1968, She and her peers had been accustomed to the sudden and marked changes in Mary's behavior, and when she began exhibiting distressful mannerisms, including shaking her head and forming a steely gaze, her peers instinctively knew she was to become violent, with the focus of her stare being the individual she would attack. On Saturday, May 11th, year 1968, a 3-year-old boy was discovered wandering dazed and bleeding in the vicinity of St. Margaret's Road, Scotswood. The child later informed police he had been playing with Mary Bell and Norma Bell atop a disused air raid shelter when he had been pushed 7 feet from the roof to the ground, inflicting a severe laceration to his head. He was unsure of which one of the girls had actually pushed him. The same evening, the parents of 3 small girls contacted police to complain that both Mary and Norma had attempted to strangle her children as they played in a sandpit. That evening, both girls were interviewed about these incidents. Both girls claiming they had simply discovered the boy bleeding heavily from a head wound after he had fallen. Further question about the attempted strangulation of the 3 young girls, Mary denied any knowledge of the incident. However, Norma admitted Mary had tried to throttle each of the girls, stating, Mary went to one of the girls and said, "What happens if you choke someone? Do they die?" Then Mary put both hands around the girl's throat and squeezed. The girl stated to go purple. I told Mary to stop, but she wouldn't. Then she put her hands around Pauline's throat, and she started going purple as well. Another girl, Suzanne Cornish, came up, and Mary did the same thing to her. Police notified the local authority of the incidents and of Mary's violent nature, but due to their age, both girls were simply given a warning, with no further action being taken. On May 25th, year 1968, the day before her 11th birthday, Belle strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown in an upstairs bedroom of a derelict house located at 85 Sapp Street, Margaret's Road. She is believed to have committed his crime alone. Brown's body was discovered by 3 children approximately at 3:30 p.m. He was lying on his back with his arms stretched over above his head. Aside from specks of blood and foam around his mouth, no signs of violence were visible upon his body. A local workman named John Hall soon arrived on the scene. He attempted to resuscitate the little kid with CPR, but no avail. On Mary's 11th birthday, May 26, she and Norma broke into and vandalized a nursery in nearby Woodland Crescent. The two entered the premises by peeling tiles off the slate roof. They tore books, upturned desks, and smeared ink and poster paints about the property before escaping. The following day, staff discovered the break-in and vandalism and immediately notified the police, who also discovered 4 separate notes that claim responsibility for Martin Brown's murder. One of these notes stated, "I murder so that I may come back." Another read, "We did murder Martin Brown. Fuck off, bastard." A third note simply read, "Fuck off, we murder. Watch out, Fanny." And the final note was the most complex reading. "You are mice. Why? Because we murdered Martin. Go Brown, you better look out. There are murders about my Fanny and all you screws." The police dismissed the incident as a tasteless and childless prank. On the afternoon of July 31st, year 1968, a 3-year-old named Brian Howell was last seen by his parents in the street outside his house, playing with one of his siblings, the family dog, and Mary Bell and Norma Bell. When he did not return home later that afternoon, concerned relatives and neighbors searched the streets without success. At 11:10 p.m., a search party discovered Brian's body between two large concrete blocks upon Tin Lizzie. The first policeman to arrive at the scene observed that a deliberate but feeble attempt had been made to conceal the body, which was covered in clumps of grass and weeds. Psoriasis was evident upon the child's lips, and several bruises and scratches were evident upon his neck. A pair of broken scissors lay beneath his feet. The coroner would conclude that Brian had died of strangulation and that he had been deceased for up to 7.5 hours before the discovery of his body. The killer had evidently squeezed Brian's nostrils closed with one hand as he and she had gripped his throat with the other. Numerous puncture wounds had been inflicted in the child's legs before death. Sections of his hair had been cut from his head. His genitals had been partially mutilated, and a crude attempt had been made to carve the initial M into his stomach. The relatively small amount of force used to murder the child led the coroner to conclude the killer was another child. The discovery of Brian Howe's body sparked a large-scale manhunt. Over 100 detectives from across northern Berlin were assigned to investigation, and more than 1,200 children had been questioned with regard to their whereabouts on August 2nd. 2 children questioned by detectives on August 1st were Mary Bell and Norma Bell, who witnesses informed investigators had been seen playing with Brian shortly before he was believed to have died. Questioned further the following day, Mary stated that she remembered seeing an 8-year-old local boy playing with Brian on the afternoon of July 31st, and that she had seen him hitting the child. Furthermore, she stated she also remembered that the boy had been covered in grass and weeds as if he had been rolling in a field, and that he had in his possession a small pair of scissors. Mary then expounded, "I saw him trying to cut a cat's tail off with the scissors, but there was something wrong with him. One leg was broken or bent." On the afternoon of August 4th, the parents of Norma Bell contacted police, stating their daughter wished to confess what she knew of the death of Brian Howe. She stated Mary had taken her to a spot on the Tin Lizzie, at which point she had been shown Brian's body. Mary had then demonstrated to her how she had strangled the child. According to Norma, Mary had confessed to her she had enjoyed strangling the child, before describing how she had inflicted the scowl marks to his stomach with a razor blade, which she had been hidden at the crime scene, and the broken scissors. Norma then led police to the crime scene and revealed the location where the razor blade was hidden. A drawing Norma made of the wounds inflicted to the boy's abdomen precisely matched those described by the coroner. Mary Bell was visited at her home in the early hours of August 5th. On this occasion, she was notably defensive when confronted with discrepancies in her previous statement, informing detectives, "You're trying to brainwash me. I will get a solicitor to get me out of this." Later the same day, Norma was questioned again. On this occasion, she made a full statement in which she admitted being present when Mary had actually strangled Brian. According to Norma, when the trio were alone on the Tin Lizzie, Mary seemed to go all funny, pushing the child into the grass and attempting to strangle him before stating to her, "My hands are getting thick. Take over." She had then run from the scene, leaving Mary alone with Brian. A forensic examination of clothing owned by both girls revealed the gray fibers discovered upon Brian's body were a precise match to the woolen dress owned by Mary. The maroon fibers upon the child's shoes were a precise match to a skirt owned by Norma. Furthermore, the same gray fibers had been found upon the body of Martin Brown. Both girls were formally charged with the murder of Brian Howby at 8 p.m. that evening. In response to this charge, Mary replied, "That's all right by me." Norma burst in tears, simply proclaiming, I'll pay you back for this." In the presence of an independent witness, Mary prepared a written statement in which she admitted to being present when Brian Howe was murdered, but insisted that murder had been committed by Norma. She also admitted she and Norma had broken into Woodland Crescent Nursery the day after the killing of Martin Brown, defacing the property before the two had written the 4 handwritten notes. The trial of Mary Bell and Norma Bell for the murders of Martin Brown and Brian Howby began at Newcastle on December 5th, the year 1968. Both girls were tried before Mr. Justice Cusack and a jury, and both pleaded not guilty to the charges. The trial lasted 9 days. On December 17th, the jury retired to consider the verdict and would deliberate for 3 hours and 25 minutes before reaching the verdicts. Mary Bell was cleared of murder, but convicted of the manslaughter of both boys on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Norma Bell was acquitted of all charges. Upon hearing the jury verdicts, Norma clapped her hands in excitement, whereas Mary burst into tears as her mother and grandmother also cried. Mr. Justice Cusack described Bell as a dangerous individual, adding she posed a very grave risk to other children, and that steps must be taken to protect the public from her. She was sentenced to be detained, effectively an indefinite sentence of imprisonment. At the time of Bell's manslaughter conviction, she was 11 years old and 6 months, making her Britain's youngest female killer, a statistic which remains to the present day. In the year of 1969, where Mary Bell was the only female among approximately 24 inmates, Bell would later claim that she was sexually abused by a member of her staff and several inmates while incarcerated at the facility, claiming the sexual abuse began when she was age 13. In November year 1973, at the age of 16, she was transferred to a secure wing of the prison. Reportedly, Miss Bell resented her transfer to the facility, and while incarcerated, unsuccessfully applied for parole. In June year 1976, Bell was transferred to Moore Court Open Prison, where she undertook a secretarial course. 15 months later, in the year 1977, Bell again made national headlines when she and another inmate absconded from this open prison. Both inmates spent several days in the company of 2 young men in Blackpool, visiting the amusements and sleeping in various local hotels, where Bell used the alias name Mary Robinson before the two parted company. Mary Bell was captured and arrested. She was returned to custody that evening. Priest was arrested in Leeds days later. Bell's penalty for leaving the facility was a loss of prison privileges for 28 days. Mary Bell was released from prison in May of the year of 1980 at the age of 23. Having served almost 11 and a half years in custody, she was granted anonymity, including a new name, allowing her to start a new life elsewhere in the country under an assumed identity. Upon her release, a spokesman is quoted as saying, "Bell wishes to be given a chance to live a normal life and to be left alone." 4 years after her release from custody. On May 25th, year 1984, Bell gave birth to a daughter. This would prove to be her only child. Her daughter knew nothing of her mother's past until the year of 1998, when reporters discovered Bell's then current location in a resort town on the coast, where both had been living approximately 18 months. This media revelation forced Belle and her 14-year-old daughter to leave their home and be driven to a safe house by undercover officers. Both mother and daughter later relocated to another part of the United Kingdom. Mary Bell's current whereabouts are unknown and remain protected by the 2003 High Court order. According to Sereni, Bell does not claim she was wrongly convicted and freely admits the abuse she suffered as a child does not excuse her crimes.